Welcome to Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. This week, we delve into the newest frontier of the sexual revolution and explore a sea change in marijuana laws with two guests separated by both a generation and half a continent. In the second half of our show, former private detective, political talk show host, and newspaper columnist Rob Douglas reports in from Colorado on the early months of that state's experiment legalizing recreational marijuana. But first, we're pleased to have in our studio Boston-based entrepreneur, inventor, and founding CEO of Boston Microfluidics, Brandon Johnson, whose company is developing an inexpensive, over-the-counter, multifunction STD test whose widespread adoption could change sexual behavior as profoundly as the pill. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here.
So, Brandon, we first met, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, I think that's right.
And you had won a business plan competition at BU even before that.
Well, actually, I think I came in third, but
well, at least
it's a while ago.
You got a couple of bucks out of it. But you've been on the trail a long time trying to basically free your generation from fear of sexually transmitted diseases.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in the 90s, we had all those videos, after-school specials telling us that if we bumped into somebody in the hallway, we definitely had AIDS right
So
then and there.
You were basically terrified for most of your youth.
Yeah, and in fact, I even remember the first time that I got tested for an STD was when I was 15 years old, having to beg my mother to take me to the doctor's office and then beg my pediatrician to test me.
Why?
Well, because
You've been active.
Yeah.
Okay, 15. Holy cow, boy, things have changed.
Well, it took me 6 months to get the courage to,
wow.
to ask parents to take me. But
describe what it is that you're developing.
So what we're working on is making it easy for anyone to test themselves at home. So the basic product is something where you can point and click, which is what our generation really needs, and get an answer to a question you have. Do I have herpes? Or maybe does my partner have herpes or my potential partner have herpes? And, you know, it's a tricky thing, not because the assays are complicated. They've been developed and in use for years, and in some cases decades.
So you're not actually developing the chemical test. You're developing a little microfluidics delivery device.
Yeah, well, it's not even all microfluidics. A lot of it's borrowed from other industries. We have things in common with biochemistry or chemical engineering companies that are working in much larger, hundreds, thousands of gallons regimes. And some of our basic technology is actually similar to the positional valving found in an M1 rifle. So we borrow from all over the place.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. But we take it all and we apply it to diagnostics, and it allows us to create a set of tools that can be very precise and very accurate with really simplistic user interventions.
And give you a yes-no answer.
Yeah.
So the sensitivity and specificity of your device will be pretty much the same as a lab device if you send it up to Quest or somebody like that.
Right. And the reason is when it goes to LabCorp or Quest, there's a trained technician who's using precision instruments to actually measure out the sample and carry out these complex processes, chemical processes, to run the assay. What we've done is create an extremely precise set of tools to automate the same actions.
All in a little plastic package.
All in a little plastic package.
Thing?
I mean, it's a little bit bigger than like a travel-sized toothbrush.
Travel toothbrush.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So you can slip one in your back pocket when you're heading out for the night.
Right, yeah. And in fact, we'll probably come out with different sizes and shapes and designs to meet whatever consumers are interested in.
You're going to do a his and hers with 2 spots in it?
Yeah, we actually want to do one design where there's a test for one person on one side and the other person on the other, and you just close at the same time, and you're both sort of locked in to get your results together.
In about a couple of 3 minutes?
Yeah, the target is under 5. I'd like to see it close to 2 or 3.
And this doesn't take a lot of training to operate?
No, in fact, one of the things that I do is take the device with me to different places. It's actually a great pickup line at a bar. Just sit down, tell somebody what I do.
No.
And then do real-time market research right there with them. But I'll show it to them and say, how would you think that it works? How would you interact with this? And they say, oh, well, I think I'd put my blood here, and then I think I'd push it closed, and then probably results come up here, right? And that's the sign that we've actually got the design where it needs to be, is that it's so easy to use that somebody could do it drunk, right? Like at a bar, never having seen the product before, because that's really what it's got to be for this to be a successful product.
To make it work, for them to be aware of it.
Yeah.
So presumably these would be sold over the counter, or they'd be sold on the internet. How would you distribute these?
Yeah, we're targeting, so we'll apply for FDA clearance for over-the-counter use. But we'll actually sell them mostly online using Google AdWords, I think, to start with. As it turns out, herpes is included in millions of searches a month, more than HIV or chlamydia in the data that I've seen. And Google has just unbelievably extensive data on what people are looking for.
But I think you were talking about hitting the big three, which is herpes, HIV, and Hep C. Are those the ones you're after?
Yeah. We'll actually start with herpes simplex 2, and then try to get herpes simplex 1, HIV, and Hep C all together on one platform eventually. But they'll probably come out as individuals. It all depends on, we'll sit down and have a discussion with the FDA to think about what's the best way to introduce these products from a regulatory standpoint and from a public safety, public interest standpoint.
So green light, have a nice night. Red light, go see your doctor.
Right, yeah, usually. Or maybe have a nice night and be a little extra careful. I mean, in most cases, people who are just aware of their status can dramatically reduce their chances of transmission. So just knowing actually has a huge impact.
Makes a big difference.
Yeah. It's not a don't have sex. It's you have this infection that you need to be responsible for and deal with, and once you educate people, they usually do a very good job of managing it and can really reduce the chance of them unwittingly giving it to a partner.
Now, when we first talked, you wangled into a lunch for some free consulting. We've kind of been at it for several years now, watching the company go along. You talked about knowing your own status, and yet it's not just about knowing your own status. You can do that anytime. It's actually knowing your potential partner's status and demonstrating your status that matters.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting part of it. Right now there's a lot of people who are sort of anxious about whether or not they might have something. But down the road, it's actually going to be used, I think, to both confirm your status, which you'll already know, and discover your potential partner's status, sort of see whether or not there's an at-risk event that's about to happen.
Know and show.
Yeah, exactly. Know and show. And I love the idea of people having this kind of interaction where they're being responsible and they're taking the step to ensure their partner's safety, and they're also being upfront about it. I mean, a big part of the company for me is just getting people talking about these things. There's a great group, the STDproject.com. Janelle Marie, she's actually going to be, she's in New York now doing a photo shoot for Cosmo, actually. And their site is just this huge blog of everybody talking about their different stories. And so many people come to that site thinking, oh no, I have this, it's the end of the world. And Janelle has been HSV2 positive for a long time, and it hasn't really impacted her life in any major way. But she's the first one to tell you, you got to go get tested. Because as soon as you get tested, you can take care of the problem, right? You can start being a responsible sex partner.
Presumably your behaviors change. And
Yeah, but only in a relatively minor way, actually. I mean, it's the people who have it and don't know it who are the big problems, or the people who have it, know it, and aren't doing anything about it, aren't telling anyone.
Right. Well, and you can out them pretty quickly with this test.
Well, you can out them pretty quickly with this test, but also, I mean, if they're sexually active, they usually get outed sooner or later anyway, right?
Yeah,
so
by a disgruntled former partner.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you the number of stories I hear where somebody was ostracized completely because of their status, solely because they didn't tell anyone.
Yeah.
So they weren't taking any steps to reduce transmission, and they infected a partner without telling them, and it was known beforehand. They knew their status and engaged, without having a discussion about it.
So is this the kind of thing that people are going to start putting on their Facebook page once the product becomes available?
Actually, yeah. So we used a home HIV test to test some of my friends. I bring people, over to try out different products and stuff like that. And one of my friends actually asked if she could Instagram her test results. I said, sure, go for it. And I see that surprisingly often. I mean, people are really interested in sharing their status and talking about it. That's the thing, is there's this dialogue that people are waiting to have, and anything like this, any kind of home STD test, gives them an opportunity to talk about something they're really interested in, which is sexual health and being a responsible sex partner.
Things have changed. It seems that your generation not only has no sexual inhibitions, there's no sense of privacy, and there's no sense of stigma.
Yeah, so whether or not this group is less sexually inhibited is sort of hard to measure. But the fact of the matter is that they're really eager to be a good partner, right, on every level. And part of that is knowing your status and being able to communicate with your partner about your status. And I mean, again, that's a big part of the company for me is enabling people to be able to find out what their situation is, find out what their partner's situation is, and work together as a team to, keep things going in the right direction, so to speak.
So, Brandon, about a year ago, I wrote a column about you in Forbes titled Cheap Over-the-Counter STD Test Turbocharges Casual Sex. I was a little snarky in how I put that together, but it seemed to get you a little visibility.
Well, yeah, I think between that and the response from Jezebel, which was...
oh, they came after me big time.
Yeah, I think she was a little... I don't know if she reacted to the title or if she actually read the whole article or what. But yeah, I love the Jezebel title. I think it's "Rejoice, Slutty Youths! An instant STD test isn't far away." I think that's
that was
what it was.
Her interpretation of my column.
Yeah. And so, I think I understand to some extent the reaction there. But in any case, it got people talking about it, which was great. And we ended up in the Daily Beast, and I did a HuffPo live
I remember
interview.
That.
Yeah.
You were very reserved in that, though, as I recall.
Well, I mean, so
they were trying to go for the prurient stuff, and you were trying to stick to the basics.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a couple of talking points that I really wanted to get across that were probably not relevant or all that exciting. But it was my first time, doing a live interview like that. But no, I mean, I think all the things that were really exciting got brought up in the Chelsea Handler video, which I think is probably my biggest accomplishment as an entrepreneur to date, is to get Chelsea to sort of like something that I did on her show. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the entrepreneur side of this, because you've been at this for a while. There's still a long road ahead. What's the status of the company?
So we've got prototypes now. We're getting in new. So the way that our device works is it's basically a front end. It would do all the work that a lab tech would for the assay. So we're bringing in new assays now.
Licensing them in.
Oh, well, actually, we're just purchasing commercially available assays
and putting them in there.
And just putting them in there and seeing if they work. And then if something looks really good, then we'll go and do a licensing deal with somebody.
Once you're further along.
Yeah. And so, I've been in this for a long time, so I've ended up meeting a lot of the people who are in senior management at all these different companies. And I think if we find a group that's got a really good strip, a really good test, then it'll be easy for us to work together to find a way to move this product forward.
What does the FDA approval process look like?
So that's not my area of expertise, but we do have experts that we're working with. My understanding is we'll do two components to the trial. One is to look at accuracy, and that's probably 1,000 or more patients where we're
And there's a
looking
gold
at
standard, so you just have to show how you compare to the gold standard.
Well, ideally, we want to take the exact same assay and just put it into our device, right? Like, we don't want to invent anything on the assay side. Then there's also the usability study. And what that's going to be is actually just putting this down in front of people and letting them use it without instructions, with somebody giving them verbal instructions, with a video. And what we ideally want to do is be able to just set this down in front of somebody and have them use it, either with images that are on the device itself or with a really simple set of instructions.
Just pictures.
Yeah, ideally, yeah. Because then if it's easy enough to use...
If Steve Jobs had invented an STD test, this would probably be it.
Well, it's funny. I mean, we always point to Apple as like this great consumer design group, and I think they really are, because they unlocked this really powerful technology by giving it a very simple user interface. But I mean, this kind of, so I mentioned the M1 rifle, right? Like, you pick that up and you know exactly how to use that too. Everything's where you'd expect it to be, right? Toothpaste, toothbrushes. I mean, there's a million consumer products that are out there that don't have any kind of instruction at all. Yeah. I mean, I think on my toothpaste, the instructions for how to open the box, not how to brush my teeth, right?
Okay.
So it really needs to be that simple in my mind. And again, if you're telling yourself, well, if they really want the answer bad enough, then you've already lost. Because the thing that really drives products like this is the user experience, which means that they have a good time or a good experience using it.
And they could virally. Oh, that's a bad analogy. They could tell their friends about it.
Well, if we're gonna have something spread virally, I'd rather it be the STD test than the STD, right?
There you go. Are you concerned about any liabilities that you might take on by offering this test to people? What if the answer is wrong? What if they don't interpret it correctly? How do you handle this from a corporate insurance perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, you should get a confirmatory test.
If it's positive.
If it's positive,
right.
Yeah. And if it's negative and you think you have it anyway, it's not a bad idea to to make an appointment with your doctor, because there's a reason that you're worried about this. If
showing symptoms or something.
Right. We aren't really in the business of selling positive test results, of diagnosing people at home. We're actually in the business of selling negative test results. We're telling people who don't have it that they don't have it still. So if there's something wrong, if you're seeing symptoms and this comes up negative, that doesn't mean that you don't have something else.
Right.
And especially if you're in a lot of discomfort. Yeah. At least check WebMD.
Right. What are you hoping to price this at?
I think we'll probably start out in the $30, $35 range and drop down from there. It depends, really. We're going to be supply limited at first, which is part of our strategy. We'll launch first using search engine marketing and Google AdWords and things like that. So
I don't think you're going to have a demand side problem. That's for sure.
Right. So we actually have to modulate demand while we get our supply chain.
So maybe start with a higher price and then,
Exactly.
and then drop it down as you could
Right.
fulfill.
And the goal would be to get it as low as we
Right.
economically
As you
could
can.
to drive volume.
Build the market.
Exactly. And then introduce the next product, right?
And eventually sell them in 6-packs.
Yes. Well, so
I won't comment about what that implies, but
it's really interesting you bring that up because I was in a meeting the other day and I was talking to a recent, well, I won't say what college they graduated from, maybe a recent college graduate, and he was saying that they had a huge outbreak at their college and everyone was getting tested because the hockey and rugby teams, which I've probably now given away what college it is, right? The hockey and rugby
were the
teams,
source.
Yeah, had gotten infected and were like spreading it all over campus, and it was this huge, outbreak.
Brouhaha.
Yeah, exactly. And so this kind of thing happens, right? There are these outbreaks. There are situations where there's a localized high prevalence. And being able to test yourself and your partner, especially if they're on the hockey team or the rugby team, gets to be really important. But the way that we got into this conversation was he said, obviously you'd sell 3-packs. And I said, 3-packs? That's interesting. And he said, yeah, because you test yourself at home and then you have 2 for when you go out. And I just...
Yeah, okay. Got to think like a young person.
Yeah. It was like this sort of eureka moment where, I was like, oh, yeah, people are really thinking this way and are really already planning out, in this kind of strategic way. And even, I mentioned earlier the Chelsea Handler video. Josh Gad was the guest. He was the snowman in Frozen or whatever.
Okay.
And when he came out on stage, he says, hey, Chelsea, do you want to grab 2 of these and go back to my place and have some fun?
No.
And use it as a pickup line, which... Again, like telling somebody that I've started this company works really well in the bars, but I never thought that somebody else would take this product and use it to try and pick up girls, especially Chelsea.
But it does make sense, and it's in this sort of a twisted kind of way.
Yeah.
So, Brandon, you've been on the venture capital fundraising trail for a while. It's been a challenge.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so what we have is something that sort of straddles healthcare and consumer products, and that's a bit unusual. Nobody went to their LPs saying, I'm going to invest in home STD tests, right? And so when we go and talk to VCs, we find that they have sometimes a little bit of trepidation if part of our business, part of our model is outside
It's unknown to them.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because how do you
domain
measure the
expertise.
risk?
Sure.
Yeah. And what we've done is start identifying the key players on the consumer side and take a look at what they've done in similar products, right? So there's no really.
How about a syndicate? One consumer products investor and one health tech investor. Each can support each other.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and I think that's probably where we're going to end up. We're talking to a little bit of both. There's also been a lot of chatter in the venture community in Silicon Valley about groups who are mostly in consumer moving into healthcare.
Well, particularly there's been a wide-scale abandonment of investment in anything that requires Medicare reimbursement.
Oh, yeah.
And you're a cash product.
Right, exactly. This is one of the things about the business that I love the most, right? So if you're a traditional diagnostics investor, you have to put out $20, $30, $40 million of marketing, hoping that you will get reimbursement 2-3 years down the road. With our stuff, we use a Google AdWords campaign. We pay them net 30 days.
Right.
We're getting our accounts receivable in 3, right? So we're getting our money.
Having lost money in that field, there are no more diagnostics investors. I mean, we've pretty much had it. It's pretty ugly out there.
Yeah, but I mean, if your experience is in that area and you've got these 2 coin tosses at the end of the investment, where one is FDA, which we mitigated that substantially, but everybody who's done those
investments should be very easy to manage that risk because you're not developing the assay.
Yeah, and then you've got reimbursement as the coin. We eliminate that completely, but I think that scares some investors off because it's a very different model than what they're used to.
But you still have patent protection.
Right. Yeah, we've got I think a dozen or so in process 2 issued.
So how much are you trying to raise right now?
We're out raising $12 million to fund product development.
Yeah, that's a big round. Yeah, and you've got some angel money in the company?
Yeah, $3.5 million or so. So the guys from ITA Software invested.
That's not a unreasonable step if you've been that far down the road.
Yeah. Well, and especially now, I mean, I can't give you the results, but I could prick your finger today and test you for a couple different things.
You can't tell me the results?
I can't tell you the results because of the FDA restrictions.
Is there some sort of experimental protocol license you can get to do product development? Or?
Yeah, and we can do it in our labs by just buying discarded samples from laboratories. So we can find everything out that we really want to know.
Need to know.
Yeah, and I think I can probably legally test you for metachloriates or some other made-up thing.
Okay.
And have you actually use the device and see how it works and stuff like that.
Just
and
to get the ergonomics right.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Brandon, how can people learn more?
Well, you can go to bostonmicrofluidics.com or knownowbmf.com and check out our website. But I'll also be blogging on the STDproject.com. I'm a guest contributor there. And I'll be telling stories and relating experiences that I've had running this company and really talking to people about these products. I mean, it's unbelievable to me the reaction that we get. They fall into one of two categories. This is great. Where can I get it?
Yep.
I would never use this. Where can I get it? This is generally what I hear. And my favorite experience was I went to get my hair cut, and I was telling my barber what I do. And he goes, Jenny, there's this really cute receptionist. She comes running over. And I had a crush on her for ages.
Yeah.
And so now I'm terrified because I'm the center of her attention. You know, you got to hear what Brandon does. And we start talking. I tell her what I do. And she goes, I would never. Me and my boyfriend would never. Oh, heartbreak. She has a boyfriend. It was over for me there. We would never use this. We could never use a product like that. And I was like, well, Jenny, you have to understand that, you know, even if 10% of the population feels differently, that's a huge market for me. I still think it's a good idea. And certainly not everybody that I've talked to about this has felt that way. And she goes, oh, okay, that makes sense. And she goes back over and they finish cutting my hair. And I walk over to pay. And she kind of gives me this look and leans in and kind of looks both ways to see if anyone's paying attention. She goes, when's it going to be available?
Well, on that note, Brandon, thanks for being on the show, and we will keep tabs on you to see how this develops.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
We've been speaking with Brandon Johnson, founding CEO of Boston Microfluidics, here on Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. Ahead, we reach out to Steamboat, Colorado, to talk to former private detective turned journalist Rob Douglas to get a first-person account of the impact of marijuana legalization on that state's happy citizens. Stay tuned.